There's an illegal underground industry in Canada that's making millions and millions of dollars, and almost nobody knows about it. And at the same time, this industry is tearing at the fabric of the country, potentially doing some very serious long-term harm that's impacting every single Canadian. And you've probably even seen evidence of it happening around you without even realizing it. You see, some business owners are taking advantage of very specific government loopholes and are legally wiggling their way through those loopholes to regularly scam people out of hundreds of thousands of dollars by selling a very special product. Now, what, you may ask, is this product? These business owners are selling jobs to employees. Yeah, I'll say it again, and you heard me correctly. They're selling open job positions, and they're selling them to foreigners, along with a very tantalizing potential bonus, the chance to become a Canadian citizen. And it's leading many people to realize, including the Globe and Mail here, that once again, Canadians are coming last. If that all sounds confusing and backwards to you, don't worry, it definitely is confusing and backwards. But in this video, we're going to break down exactly how and why this is allegedly happening, who it stands to benefit, and how it could be impacting you and your community directly. To understand how this is happening, we first need to understand a very reasonable program that the government has put in place. A reasonable program that now is being grossly taken advantage of. It's called the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. First, let's get into how this program is supposed to be used, and then we'll get into the criminal way that it's actually being used. Now, the point of the program is to fill job vacancies for Canadian businesses when they can't find a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident who is willing and has the required skills or is even able to take on that job. Through this program, when employers can't find a local worker, they can bring in a temporary foreign worker and get them a work permit so that they can work in Canada. But in order to use this program, businesses do have to prove three things. First, they have to prove that they can't find anyone who's already here who can fill the position. Now, number two, they have to prove that they really do need this specific type of worker. And finally, they also have to prove that they have the funds required to pay this worker's wage once they get here. And just as a little bit of foreshadowing here, these areas are some of the areas where businesses are lying and lying in a big way, but we'll get to that in just a second. So in order to prove these things, the businesses will assemble some forms that show they have proof of funds, and it also shows that they've posted the job listing on Job Bank, which is a Government of Canada run job board, and they'll also have to post it on two other job boards additionally for at least 28 days to make sure that there's no Canadians that are already here that can fill this role. They then need to submit an explanation of why any applicants who did apply to these jobs that are posted on the job board weren't actually hired. They weren't suitable for the position. The business then submits these details to Service Canada in a big application. This application is called a Labor Market Impact Assessment, otherwise known as an LMIA, and that's how we'll be referring to it going forward. Now, if the business meets the criteria, then Service Canada will approve their LMIA. That's a huge deal for the business because having an approved labor market impact assessment gives them a lot of power, chiefly the power to add any potential foreign worker's name to this successful LMIA approval. Now, this is incredibly desirable for a potential foreign worker because having your name attached to a job offer that is LMIA approved means that you can very easily get a work permit through this temporary worker program, allowing you to work in Canada even if you're not a citizen or a permanent resident. But it gets even better, especially if you're a foreign worker who one day wants to become a permanent resident of Canada. Getting an LMIA job like this is striking gold. And trust me, it's important that you understand exactly how and why these LMIA jobs are so valuable, because it turns out that these jobs are hitting the black market and are selling for insane amounts of money. But before we get into all of that, I want to take a second to thank the sponsor of today's video, and that's Private Internet Access. Private internet access is a VPN, which allows you to hide your IP address and encrypt your internet connection. Now, I'm not personally an expert when it comes to internet network security or anything like that, but I don't do anything sketchy that I wouldn't want people seeing, but I realized that with enough seemingly innocent pieces of information about my digital life, that a potential bad actor could put together a pretty accurate profile of who I am and what I do. So using private internet access gives me the peace of mind that my internet connection is secure, free from the potential monitoring. And all of this is in addition to some of the more well-known benefits of a VPN, like giving you access to more content on streaming services by making them think that you're in another country, allowing you to view that country's catalog of content. Additionally, there are a lot of Canadians that are becoming less trusting of the government in connection with some bills like Bill C-11, Bill C-18 that restrict your access to certain content on social media platforms. So one of the only ways to bypass these changes is to connect to a VPN to shield your location information. Now, private internet access has been downloaded over 30 million times and has an independently audited no logs policy that makes sure that none of your personal data is ever stored by them. And private internet access has given me a special link that you can use to get about 83% off of their typical pricing, bringing it down to just over $2 a month with a bonus 4 months for free. And all of this has a 30-day money-back guarantee. So make sure to use the link in the description to check out private internet access today. So back to these LMIA jobs. These are jobs that are incredibly valuable to foreigners who one day want to become a permanent resident of Canada. Now, not only can they start working in the country, but also they're able to boost their score and kind of jump forward in the line of people who are all trying to immigrate to Canada permanently to become permanent residents. We'll get more into exactly how this process works in just a second. But first, I want to really get into the dirt of all of this, to talk about the criminal behavior that's allegedly going on, behavior that now, finally, some politicians are starting to talk about, while some politicians continue to turn a blind eye with questionable motives and why they're actually doing that. But let me show you this clip from just a couple of months ago. This is a Canadian member of Parliament named Tom Kamiak, who's on the Immigration Committee, and he outlines in this clip the desperate need for them to study this underground market that has popped up, revolving entirely around these approved LMIA jobs. Listen to this.
So I move the following motion that's been put on notice. The committee conduct a study into the widespread labor market impact assessment fraud as reported by the Globe and Mail starting on September 29th, 2023, specifically referencing immigration consultants and lawyers whom allegedly fraudulently marketed LMIAs to migrants in values as high as $80,000. In the article, it refers to the following. The federal government told the Globe and Mail it was aware of scams involving LMIA fraud, but had taken steps last year to guard against them with changes to regulations. I believe the minister should come in and explain why LMIAs are being sold for up to $80,000. The demand for payment from migrants to get jobs in Canada was still pervasive and was also being used as a route for settling in Canada. I don't believe there's been much effectiveness in any of the anti-fraud measures that have been introduced. I have an example recent from a Facebook page that I found that's been referred to me by immigration consultants. And one of them here, it says, Cook pre-approved Saskatoon for visitor visa only, market price. And the only thing that this could refer to says, please DM, there's 171 comments. People from other countries coming to Canada, they're the ones being defrauded. They're the ones being targeted by these fraudulent employers.
So he's requesting that the committee study this fraud, citing evidence that immigration consultants and lawyers whom allegedly fraudulently marketed labor market impact assessment jobs to migrants in values as high as $80,000, even though it's against the rules, he wants to study all of this, and he wants to call in Canada's immigration minister to come testify as a part of this study. What's going on here? So now you can see just how profitable this practice could be. $50,000, $80,000, even sometimes over $100,000 per LMIA employee is being extracted. But this does raise the question, who exactly is making off with this money like a bandit, and how exactly is the operation working? Well, thankfully for us, these alleged details have been revealed in a couple of different places lately. One all the way back from March of 2024 from this immigration consultant named Steve Palasini. I recommend you go follow him. And the other is from an anonymous whistleblower that claims to work in the government department that processes labor market impact assessments. They did a AMA on Reddit explaining some of the inner workings of how exactly this scam works. Now you might say, Russell, these aren't the most verifiable sources, but to me, what they're saying does pass the smell test. And remember, the fact that this black market of employment exists and that fraud with LMIA jobs exists has been largely reported by the Globe and Mail. And as always, after every video, I send out all the sources I've used via email. So if you'd like to receive those, you can sign up for the mailing list in the description of this video. First of all, let's get into who's making all the money and who's being taken advantage of, and who's the one that's greasing the wheels of the whole operation. Now, here's how it all works based on these claims. Let me sketch it out for you. By the way, if you enjoy these videos, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm coming out with these approximately weekly, and it takes a bunch of work, so your support is greatly appreciated. First, it seems like there are two different streams of fraud going on here. One where the businesses themselves have no idea it's even happening, and the other where those businesses are in on the scheme. First, let's talk about the version where the businesses don't even know that this is happening. How could that be? Often, businesses will genuinely hire an immigration consultant to help them when they're struggling to hire for a position. Now, in case it's not already clear, there's tons of businesses that do this legitimately, and there are consultants who help them legitimately with knowledge of the system, right? In this video, we're talking about the consultants who have illegally found a way to make their businesses a hell of a lot more profitable. Now, after the business hires a consultant, they'll handle the whole LMIA application process, the posting of the job to the job boards to prove there's no Canadian who can fill that role, and they're going to do everything that they possibly can to make sure they get this LMIA approval. Once they've got the LMIA approval, the consultant will then connect the business with a foreign worker and also connect that foreign worker with the approved labor market impact assessment. In other words, this immigration consultant will work as a middleman, sort of representing both parties here, both the business and the foreign worker. That immigration consultant will find the foreign worker that will then be attached to the Canadian business, instead of the Canadian business being able to search through all of these foreign workers to try to find somebody qualified. Instead, the immigration consultant will be the one that chooses who is going to get attached to this LMIA and who's going to end up working for this business. Now, giving this immigration consultant a middleman position between the employer and the potential employees creates an opportunity for the consultant to act improperly, because they have all the power that comes along with an LMIA job, right? This consultant can then essentially sell this position to the highest bidder amongst a bunch of different foreign workers. They'll have the foreign workers pay them so that they will be the one that is attached to this approved LMIA job. The foreign worker is willing to pay the money because being attached to this job offer drastically impacts their ability to cut ahead in the permanent resident application line. In this situation, the Canadian business, the employer, might not even know that this fraud is happening. In their eyes, they just hired an immigration consultant who helped them get an LMIA approval and helped them fill a role that they actually desperately needed because they couldn't hire anybody in the area. In other situations, however, the business and the consultants are allegedly working together to get even more juice from the squeeze. Take a look at this. In this version of the scam where the Canadian business is actually knowingly committing this fraudulent activity, usually the Canadian business will find a crooked immigration consultant, or perhaps this crooked immigration consultant will approach the Canadian business. And this could be a business that sort of is seeing, oh, this could actually be really profitable if we start hiring via LMIAs. Now, this business could even be a business that actually has no trouble hiring for their roles if they were to put out a job listing in the community, and they might not even have a need for any new actual employees. It doesn't matter, they can still make money selling labor market impact assessment jobs. The consultant will then fraudulently fill out the entire LMIA application to make sure that it goes through. They'll post the job listing on Job Bank, the federally run job board, but they will also satisfy the requirement that the job is posted elsewhere by posting the job to what I'm calling ghost sites or ghost job boards. These are job boards that have been created specifically for this scheme, and they see very little to no traffic on them, right? And that is actually beneficial to the scam because these job boards that have no traffic and very little people actually searching for jobs on them means that if you post your job here, well, then you can satisfy the LMIA criteria that you're posting your job listings on a job board, but it decreases the chances that any actual Canadian will see the posting. And remember, in this situation, they don't want to hire Canadians because they can hire foreign workers through LMIAs and get paid big bucks for it. Now, after 28 days, the consultant then would have enough to prove that there were no Canadians who could fill the job. Even if there were Canadian applicants, it's incredibly easy for the business and the consultants to lie about the application numbers and reasons that any applicants who did apply were not suitable for hiring. And once they sort of lie about this information, then there's a good chance that their LMIA will be approved. So not only can these consultants and businesses that are working together get this fraudulent LMIA approval just by using these job boards, but also they can kind of lie on the application because the Canada service agents or the Service Canada agents have very little power in this situation. They don't have any access to the Canada Job Board posting data or how many applicants were there. They have no power to investigate the businesses past just asking them to tell the truth, and they're severely under-resourced to be able to process the extremely high volume of LMIA applications, which makes it incredibly easy for fraudulent applications to fall through the cracks. Once they've obtained this fraudulent LMIA approval, the process works in the same way we talked about before. The consultant finds an applicant with money and sells them this position, and along with it, the LMIA approval. The only difference here is that the money doesn't just go to the immigration consultant in this situation. The Canadian business is also cut into this money that's passed under the table to make sure that a certain person gets this job that has an LMIA approval. But things get even crazier because sometimes the foreign worker never ends up working the job at all. There are allegations that some businesses will sell the job and will put the person on their payroll, but will then require the foreign worker to pay back all of those wages in cash under the table. And this works out really well for all parties, right? The consultant and business owners get paid handsomely, while the job applicant, because they've paid for this LMIA job, gets to move up in the permanent resident application line, which is their end goal, to become a permanent resident in Canada. There was never a real job. There was never even ever any intent to hire a Canadian. In this specific version of the scheme, all of the parties are acting fraudulently for their own personal benefit. But it goes even further because in some cases, businesses allegedly will take full advantage of the leverage that they hold in Canada's immigration system. Leverage that I'm starting to question if they should have. They'll trap foreign workers in an abusive relationship with their employer where speaking out against them and what's happening to them could crush their dreams of ever becoming a permanent resident. This is an example from Steve Palacini. This is the immigration consultant who has talked extensively about how this is all going down. He says, consider an employer with a legitimate need for a food service supervisor. Rather than employing a qualified Canadian or permanent resident who would command a wage of $17 an hour, they might instead opt for a foreign worker. On paper, the foreign worker should be paid the same rate, but in reality, a portion of their wage is kicked back to the employer through the consultant, effectively creating a situation akin to modern-day slavery. This presents the foreign worker with a difficult dilemma. They might be aware of the overcharge, but not its extent, and if the employer is subsidizing their wages through these payments, which they often are, it enables the hiring of labor that is below minimum wage and deeply impacts our labor market in Canada. To the extent that this is all happening, this is straight up wage suppression. Businesses are reducing costs via these illegal and exploitative relationships, all the while taking work away from Canadians who are legitimately looking for jobs and these days are having more challenges doing so. And at the same time, they're keeping wages down for Canadians who are already legitimately employed. Remember, if there's no need to raise wages if you're a business for workers to entice them to come to work for your business, if instead you can give this work to a temporary foreign worker and get tens of thousands of dollars for doing so and have their wages subsidized and in effect getting a worker for far less than minimum wage. It's a big issue that we allow businesses, mostly unregulated businesses, to have so much sway over the immigration system in Canada, especially when government agencies have very little power to oversee this entire process and to monitor it for the fraud that we've been talking about. It raises the question, why do these LMIA job offers have such an impact on the chances of a potential immigrant getting permanent resident status in Canada? Now, it's my understanding that it's due to these job offers, which heavily boost their chances by increasing their scores in various immigration programs. This is what makes these job offers so incredibly valuable. It's because it pushes people to the front of the line or increases their chances that they'll be accepted as a permanent resident. And for some people, specifically foreign people who actually have a fair amount of money, well, it's worth it to pay the tens of thousands of dollars that comes along with getting a job like this because of the amount it impacts their ability or their chances to become a permanent resident in Canada. One of the most direct ways to become a permanent resident in Canada is to enter via the express entry pool. Now, in order to be considered in this express entry pool, you need to determine that you are a federally skilled worker. And there are a number of ways and point systems that you can prove that you're a federally skilled worker, one of which is actually having arranged employment in Canada, having a job offer on the table. And one of these types of job offers could be a labor market impact assessment job offered by these businesses for sale. And then once you've made your way into the express entry program, well, then there's a whole other ranking system. It's called the comprehensive ranking system. And yet again, inside of this ranking system, they put a lot of weight on you having a valid job offer, a job offer that it seems you can simply buy. In this program, as it stands today, just having a valid job offer gives you more points towards your permanent residency than an entire year of actual work history inside of Canada. You can get this job offer through an LMIA that you buy even if you're outside of the country, right? You don't actually have to work the job. Additionally, another immigration route is through the Provincial Nomination Program, otherwise referred to as the PNP, where each individual province can push you further forward in the process. Now, most of these PNP routes in each province give an outsized amount of points to potential immigrants who have a job offer secured. This is the case for British Columbia, as well as Ontario, and a number of different provinces, all giving an increased likelihood of you getting permanent residency if you have a job offer. Now, I find all of this pretty shocking. I mean, any type of illegal fraud like this is obviously not good. It's not good. But it could also have some more serious impacts on Canada as a whole, right? We've already talked about how this drives down wages of legitimately employed Canadians, but it also undermines Canada's immigration system entirely, whether it be through this LMIA job fraud or the explosion in international students due to their profitability for colleges and universities. Both of these things are a financial exploitation of these systems done by profit-seeking individuals, and I think it's awful. And it results in a backward system where a potential new permanent resident's positive qualities are outweighed by a different candidate who maybe has less desirable qualities, but even though they have less desirable qualities or qualifications, they have the money to pay for the extra points on their application that come with having a certified job offer. Instead of bringing in the skilled workers we actually need, the workers, the people who may not be willing to pay tens of thousands of dollars, who may not be willing to commit fraud knowingly to increase their chances, instead of bringing those people in, we're instead rewarding individuals who have no problem paying their way to the front of the line and see no problem with doing so fraudulently. Now, the question is that the type of person that we want to be adding to the country instead of hardworking, qualified foreign workers with integrity who may not be wealthy, not wealthy enough to pay $50,000 for an LMIA, but are willing to contribute to our society? We're passing over these people for the people that maybe have deeper pockets and can buy their way to the front of the line. I think Canada's immigration ministers have a lot to answer for, be it Mark Miller now, or Sean Fraser, who previously held the role before him, or even Marco Medicino and Ahmed Hussein before then, politicians that I've had some problems with in other ways in the past as well. But there are some potential solutions. The clearest one is to tie less weight to having a job offer in the permanent resident immigration process. Instead of tying the weight to a job offer that an individual might not actually end up ever working, why not tie it to actual work experience in Canada itself? And you wouldn't have to rely on the businesses as heavily to provide this information because it would be tracked via the taxes that these temporary workers file in Canada each year. Additionally, I think there definitely needs to be more punishment for individuals and businesses and consultants who skirt the rules. I think these penalties should be not just financial, but probably criminal as well. And these punishments should be greater than the benefit that taking these actions provides them, right? What's a $10,000 fine here and there if you're making 80 grand per hire, right? This fraud's resulting in us not welcoming the most qualified, productive, and likely to succeed individuals. But at the same time, more and more existing Canadians are becoming more and more disenfranchised with Canadian institutions as a result. Like, if you think about it, we've got young Canadians who used to be able to get summer jobs easily. They could build their work experience, maybe learn what they want and what they don't want out of a career, out of a job. These days, getting that kind of experience is incredibly challenging, especially when businesses can make thousands of dollars to hire a temporary foreign worker instead of you while benefiting from a slave-like subsidized labor situation that we're seeing could be happening via these allegations. It's not fair for Canadian citizens, it's not fair for Canadian permanent residents, and it's not fair for legitimate foreign workers who have all of the qualifications to come here, but instead are passed over because fraudulent applicants have the money to pay for more points. It's rough. But I'm curious what you think about this whole situation. What have I missed here? What have I gotten right? Have you seen anything in your community that leads you to believe this is happening? I wonder to what scale this is happening. I definitely will be keeping tabs on this whole situation as these ministers testify in front of the immigration committees. And if you want to follow along, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I appreciate you doing that. Again, you can get all of the sources for these videos by clicking the link to join the mailing list. After every video, all of the sources go out in a newsletter format, so you can get those there. Again, subscribe to the channel. Appreciate you watching this video. I really hope it helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.